Senator Josh Hawley and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison got into a shouting match during a Senate hearing on Thursday. The Senate Homeland Security Committee hearing was over a federal investigation into an alleged fraud within Minnesota involving the misappropriation of millions of dollars in government funds, primarily targeting federal food, nutrition, and child care programs.
The confrontation started with Hawley questioning Ellison about his actions surrounding the nonprofit Feeding Our Future. The nonprofit was at the center of a $250 million scheme to allegedly defraud a child nutrition program during the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's listen.
Here's what you said. Let's take a look. You said, it's not a question. You said to them, send me the names of all these folks who are investigating them. You said to them, send me their names. And I'll take that list and I'll call the person over at Education who was investigating them and say, what's going on? Why am I getting these complaints? Then he went on to say, I already have my team working on this. What day should we get together to discuss it again?
The Center for the American Experiment, a conservative Minnesota-based nonprofit, in April released a 54-minute recording of two future criminal defendants with ties to Feeding Our Future during a meeting with Ellison on December 2021. The Missouri Republican during the hearing kept pressing Ellison to accept that the Minnesota AG was complicit in this fraud scheme that resulted in the theft of federal funds. Let's listen.
Why did you help them?
First of all, I didn't help them.
You did help them.
No, I did not. I certainly didn't.
You're saying you didn't do anything for them. You didn't.
Well, wait a minute.
I already have my team working on this again. That's not you?
I have my team assisted with the information that led to the prosecution and conviction of these people.
No, you didn't. You didn't lift a finger to prosecute them. No, you did not.
No, because it was a federal prosecution.
You had, BS. You had whistleblowers come to you as early as 2019.
You're the one talking BS.
Hey, listen, it's my time.
Hawley then called for Ellison to resign and be put behind bars, to which Minnesota Attorney General shot back. Let's listen.
As early as 2019,
don't call me
whistleblowers came to, well, I should call you prisoner because you ought to be in jail.
Well, we'll see what you can do.
In 2019, whistleblowers came to you in your office and referred to you fraud allegations from Feeding Our Futures, and you blew them off. You've been right at the center of this fraud thing from the beginning, and you've enabled it. And, sir, you should resign.
And, sir, you should resign. I was thinking the same thing about you.
This week got really hectic with hearings. There's been a lot of yelling. I'm on the side of, if anybody was complicit in fraud, they should be prosecuted. I'm also scaling back and remembering the time that we're looking at. It's a little frustrating that we are so laser focused on Minnesota when the country has been focused on prosecuting a variety of criminals in all states that were committing violations and fraud during COVID. I think that it's warranted to look into anybody who is committing fraud, and especially if they took donations, get them out of here. I'm not opposed to that. I just think that this intense, overly focus on Minnesota when we need to make sure that we're combing through a variety of states is also important.
I mean, I'll say the FBI does have a special unit that they are using to investigate specific pandemic-related fraud, and that's why there were so many indictments coming out of Minnesota from the DOJ. There were 70-plus various indictments and even convictions, and I think that the reason why Minnesota became sort of the main target is because they were just finding so much, and it was concentrated in a specific community, which made it easier to kind of trace all of the paper trails. And then you have this added element of as well of the politicians there taking donations from the groups that were committing the fraud and potentially helping them avoid investigation or accountability. And even worse in this case is that Keith Ellison is the attorney general, right? He is the top cop
where the buck stops.
In Minnesota. The buck absolutely stops with him. So if he is turning a blind eye to fraud or even promising to try to get investigators off of their backs, that is a huge affront to the taxpayers of Minnesota, and he absolutely should be held accountable for that.
I don't have a defense. I'm not here to.
And it's okay to not.
Right. Something that I say all the time is that I can see right from wrong. And so there's a lot of details coming out of Minnesota that I find to be extremely alarming from the fact that if you think that somebody committed a crime, you're not looking into them specifically because of their race. That's a problem for me. We should be looking into anybody that commits fraud, and there should not be a fear of doing so. I think that it's a problem if the Attorney General is taking donations specifically from a group that he may have been tipped off about. That's a problem. And so I think that part of the agreements with across the aisle is that we want to get more corruption out of politics. The part that struck me the wrong way about the entire Minnesota investigation was the attack of the Somali people as a whole as a result of what people that were Somali descent that lived in Minnesota did. And I think that there are a variety of Somali people that live in America that don't commit fraud. And I think what the president did is paint with a broad stroke brush and make us like untrusting of an entire country. And I don't ever like that, because I think that that is not appropriate. But when we look at officials that are doing things that, come on, there's too much smoke over here. And Walz also said, I dropped the ball. Just in December, he tried to actually enact some type of policy that actually was going to really, really target and look into, or assign people to look into the fraud himself. And so 2025 was too late. I'll give people COVID. I'll give everybody, they were scrambling. I'll give you till 2022. But when you get 3 years past it, we're well out of the pandemic. Unacceptable, and it should be reviewed.
Well, and also in Minnesota, the fraud started before the pandemic, because according to some public reports, Attorney General Keith Ellison was tipped off in 2019, so the year prior. And from my understanding, there have been local journalists who have been raising red flags about this for a decade, if not longer. And so it was easier for them to sort of skate by during the pandemic. Maybe they were doing it at higher levels than they were previously. But it's pretty clear based on the timeline of events that they had started this back in probably 2010 to the 2013 area, continued on until they finally started this special COVID fraud unit out of the DOJ to try to investigate, because Minnesota was just like, whatever.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. Minnesota has a lot of explaining to do across the board. Minneapolis, Minnesota, they have a state and a city now that has all of the nation's attention for a variety of reasons, whether it's the immigration story that we just talked about earlier today, or the fraud that led to some of these immigration tactics being used. So whoever takes the governor position there, and whoever is the new leadership, is going to have a lot on their hands and needs to be the right person in order to kind of take away a lot of the stain coming from, both sides, whether it's the stain of the fact of what happened and the recuperation from incidents that just happened there in the last few weeks, but also the stain of just overlooking a variety of fraud cases for years. So how the state moves forward is going to be interesting to watch, because there's a lot to pick up the pieces from.
Right. And I know Republicans, both for the Senate and the governor's race, feel that this gives them a great opportunity, because obviously Minnesota is a lean blue state. Hasn't really had much Republican representation on the statewide level, and they're hopeful that this whole fraud scandal, regardless of who ends up running in the Senate and governor race, I know Amy Klobuchar is trying to get Tim Walz's seat. They feel like, okay, the people in Minnesota have lost trust in their public officials. They're pretty much all Democrats. Maybe we can run on this idea of being the cleanup team. We'll see what happens. It's still tough. It's an uphill battle for them, but I know that they're probably going to be investing more than they would have otherwise if this whole story hadn't broken.
Yeah, if they ever had a leg to stand on in a blue state, this would be the one. Up next, a new report suggests that the FBI spent several years gathering intel on public figures without having a warrant. We'll be right back.